I just tell the truth, and telling the truth is crazy in a world full of lies. If you mix brilliance with bravery, that we can ignite something. Even this conversation alone can ignite the people.
The time is now to express and for people to believe in themselves. The time is now for it to be okay to be great. People in this world shun people for being great, for being a bright color, for standing out. But the time is now to be okay to be the greatest you.
Hey guys, what's up? It's your girl Kelly, and we are back with another video. If you are new to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I would very much appreciate that. And if you are into things like true crime stories, politics, and news, then I guarantee you will enjoy as well. And if you are not new to the channel, you're a returning listener or subscriber, thank you for being a friend as always, guys. I really so greatly appreciate you for doing that, and welcome back. So let's get into it today, guys. We're going to be doing another little, I guess you can call this a drunk history video. We're going to get into some things, guys. So I've been wanting to do this video. I've done like a ton of research, or, you know, as much as I could, because I literally, the more I went down a black hole on this topic, the angrier I got. But it's going to be a little bit of a drunk history, so I don't know if y'all can hear it. I got my drink. Okay, that's called a drink. I don't know. I don't even know if you can hear it, but probably you can. And yeah, we're going to get into LBJ, guys. What do y'all know about LBJ? Probably most Americans, not very much, because I didn't even really know that much about him until I started doing all this research. But I can conclusively say he is one of the worst presidents, and he ushered in some of the worst policies that are still affecting us to this day, and I wanted to point some of those things out. So we're going to get into some videos, we're going to get into a little bit of history, and then at the very end we're going to talk about another person who ushered in, you know, very bad things, very horrible contributions to our society as a whole and to blacks in America. Okay, so I just want to start this video by saying, forewarning, you know, if you guys are sensitive, or if you are, you know, to get triggered easily. Okay, we're going to be talking about race in this video, so I just want to point that out. You know, as a white woman, a lot of people, they might say that I have no right to talk about this, but I'm here to tell you, yes, I do. Because we all live in America, and we all have opinions, and if we want to make things better as a collective, which I do, then I think we need to talk about these things. But I just will put this out there, that all of these topics, everything I'm about to discuss, is for entertainment purposes only. It's my opinion, and it's not meant to harm or to be disparaging towards anybody. But if you are a sensitive type person or whatever, just click off now, because I don't know, you might get triggered. And listen, I don't know what to tell you about that, but all of it's meant in good faith, and I want to further the conversation about this topic, because I think it's important, and I think that a lot of times what you'll find is that you'll find either, you know, black people have an open mind about this type of thing, and a lot of them have actually come to like an even further position on this than most white people have. And so we're going to get into some Thomas Sowell. We're going to get into a little bit of Larry Elder, and just, you know, like black historians, like black scholars, like actual scholars. I'm not talking about like the Twitter scholars. I'm talking about like actual intellectual people who are black, who have spoken about these issues. And I find it to be fascinating, because you either have those type of people, or you have the type of people who are totally closed off to any sort of talk in regards to this topic, or hearing any sort of narrative other than their own. So I think we need to bridge that divide and really figure out what the hell is going on in this country, so we can try to maybe fix things, guys. I don't know, is that crazy to try to fix things? I don't know. Y'all let me know. So let's get into some JFK.
And we must face the fact that the United States is neither omnipotent nor omniscient, that we are only 6% of the world's population, and that we cannot impose our will upon the other 94% of mankind, that we cannot right every wrong or reverse each adversity, and that therefore there cannot be an American solution to every world problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it.
Okay, guys, so I just wanted to start off with that, especially the first video, because this is where it all began, okay? So you can argue the point of when it was in history that we actually lost our country, technically, you know, and that is an argument that one could make. You can be in denial all you want, but the fact of the matter is that our country was sold out a long time ago, and it has been a slow creep from that point to where we find ourselves now. And I would say that this is a really strong argument. There's a really strong argument for JFK's presidency being a major catalyst in the, like, perpetuation of this plot to basically capture America and to destroy it from within. So you could say that maybe it started with World War II or even World War I. It might have started with FDR's the New Deal. You know, there's different points in history where obviously we had things that happened to us that, looking back now, we can see where, okay, that was a little bit sketchy, but JFK's presidency was a major turning point. So let's get into a little bit of history on that front here, and I'm going to tell you guys about how it happened and how LBJ actually came to power, surprisingly under JFK. So let's talk about it, y'all. So let's start here. 1948. Lyndon B. Johnson was actually running for the Senate in Texas. So the reason why this is very important is because his rise to power kind of started here. And it started with what a lot of people say are a stolen election, guys. I know y'all are shocked to hear that. The idea of stolen elections is just so crazy, right? I mean, YouTube said it was okay for us to say it like 3 days ago. But up until that point, if you said the words stolen election, people would think that you were a conspiracy theorist. But it is very safe to say that many people did not think that Lyndon B. Johnson won this Senate Texas race. And let me tell you why. So there was this ballot box 13, right, that came from a small county in Texas where Lyndon B. Johnson hailed from, that was suspiciously missing. Okay, so the Associated Press interviewed Judge Salas, I don't know how you pronounce it. So, and at one point, he finally kind of owned up to this. So there was many different interviews that he had given over the years in regards to this, controversy that surrounded this election. And recently, he agreed to tell his full version of what happened. And he said that he decided to break his silence in quest of peace of mind and to reveal to the people the corruption of politics. Dun, dun, dun. Salas says now that he lied during an aborted investigation of the election in 1948 when he testified that the vote count was proper and above board. I was just going along with my party, he says. Wow. A Democrat lying and corrupting elections? That is crazy. And it's not to say, like, obviously, they all do this. Republicans, Democrats. I would actually be one to argue that we don't have two parties. We have a uniparty. There's only just our government, and our federal government is out of control. They are completely, in this power grab move at all times, and they don't really care. They do this like political theater where they pretend like they're on opposite sides of the discussion, and they pretend like they have these, head-to-head battles, but it's all bullshit, quite frankly. So, long story short, LBJ became senator due to this very sketchy election, okay, where it was like, I think 87 votes that he won by. And again, there was a ballot box that came up missing from a small county in Texas that everyone was very, very concerned about. But nevertheless, there he was in the Senate. And in 1956, he became a favorite at the DNC to become the nominee. But there was a little problem, because by this time, JFK had become a rising star in the Senate, and he was out of, I believe, Massachusetts. And he was nearly chosen as the vice president nominee under Governor Adlai Stevenson of Illinois, who was running for president in 1956. So he ended up not getting the nominee for vice president in 1956, probably all the more better for him. So he was not ultimately chosen, and he gave a concession speech on live television, and this elevated his national presence and brought him even further into the awareness of Americans. So this was kind of like the turning point for JFK and his, like the American people to become aware of who he was, because TV was just kind of starting to become a thing, and a lot of people, they weren't really familiar with a lot of their politicians. They didn't really know, because there was obviously no access other than like newspapers and things that they could read. So the idea that, you could watch a speech like this in your living room was completely and utterly revolutionary. And just a side note here, guys, how crazy is it to think that, like, just what was that, like 60 years ago or something like that, like 60, 70 years ago, TV, like a television, a box TV, was like a revolutionary invention. And in less than a century, look at how far we've come. And now we're just these like weird ass crazy, like people chopping their tits off, people like, stuck in their phones 24/7. It's like a dystopian hellhole. It really is crazy to think how we went in less than a century from people being like completely and utterly like mind blown by like a box television that only played like, black and white TV, to everybody having a smartphone in their pocket that's giving them cancer, and your daughter wants to chop her titties off, and your son wants to become a woman. So it's what a world we're living in, guys. Just what a world. But again, I digress. So back to JFK and LBJ. In 1958, JFK was reelected in the Senate by a huge margin. So after this major win that he had, he started carefully calculating his pursuit of the presidency. And by this time, he was already putting it into the minds of the press and the public that he was signaling that he was going to be running. So when he won the nominee, he chose LBJ to be his running mate. So JFK was president for several years, almost 3, I guess you would say, and before something tragic happened, which would ultimately lead to one of the worst presidents in U.S. history, and that was 11/22/63. In a bid to win support from Texas voters for the upcoming 1964 re-election and secure a Democrat victory in the state, he was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, while on a campaign tour, and LBJ was sworn in as president on the same day on Air Force One on the tarmac in Dallas. And some might say that's a little sketchy. I don't know. We might do a deep dive into that whole situation and JFK and the whole CIA, the Bay of Pigs, how it was that he actually came to be assassinated only a few years into his presidency, and how, all of these policies that were attributed to JFK were kind of tweaked and then revamped and then fed to the American public in a time of great mourning, in a time of great sadness. People were very, very traumatized by the assassination of a very greatly loved president. And a lot of these policies, I would argue, were pushed through under the guise of, people's vulnerabilities, and under the guise of, everyone was kind of just a little bit shell-shocked by what had happened. And I don't find it to be that coincidental that then we had some of the worst policies that were implemented under LBJ, and kind of attempted to be tied back to JFK. I don't know. Guys. Y'all let me know if y'all want me to do a history on that as well. So I'm going to try to run through this kind of quickly now. In the months after the JFK assassination, LBJ, in an attempt to calm the nation and provide reassurance while also invoking JFK's beloved memory, he turned his focus to one of JFK's most cherished projects, civil rights. LBJ urged Congress to pass JFK's legislative agenda, with the focus on civil rights being in the forefront. So it's interesting because, like I said, a lot of this was under the guise that these were JFK's policies. This was his wish. This was his, this is his dying wish. But I call bullshit, guys. So let's get into some of these things. Okay, so let's start with this article here by AEI.org. So the poverty rate in 2012 was 15%, slightly higher than it was in 1966. It is true, however, that the standard of living for all Americans, including those below the poverty line, has improved immeasurably since Johnson's day. Today, by most measures, the poor live better than middle-class Americans did in 1960s. They certainly have access to amenities such as automobiles, microwaves, dishwashers, computers, and cell phones that were either unavailable in the past or owned only by the well-off. Undoubtedly, a good deal of this progress has been due simply to economic growth, but Mr. Eberstadt writes, the Great Society programs did their part in virtually ending the sort of material deprivation people knew back in the 1960s. And I would counter that point with saying, are we better off? Are we? It's a whole lot of bullshit here. Oh, you're doing great, guys. You have microwaves now. Yeah. And TVs. You're welcome. Yeah. Hope you're having fun. Hope you're living a great life. Yeah. No thanks. So, what Mr. Woods never...
There is very grave danger.
Excuse me. What Mr. Woods never grapples with is the cost of this generosity. The Congressional Research Services notes that in 1962, before the Great Society began, mandatory spending was only 30% of the federal budget. Today, that figure is nearly 60% and climbing. Medicare and Medicaid together cost nearly $1 trillion annually. In a federal budget that was $3.8 trillion in 2015, guys. That's insane. Together with Social Security are the main drivers of the national debt, which is now over $19 trillion. And now it's $30 trillion. When was this article written? Yeah, this was in 2016. So, oh my God, this is so... okay, so that's why I said this was pissing me off so bad. I had to just finally come on here and do it. So in like 7 years, it's increased by another $10 trillion, okay? Ridiculous shit. Ridiculous. On the current trajectory, spending on healthcare, Social Security, and interest on the debt will consume all federal tax revenues by 2045, leaving nothing left over for discretionary but necessary programs such as defense and medical research. That is why even some Democrats have joined the many Republicans talking in recent years about the need for entitlement reform. And when they mean even some Democrats, they mean literally just Joe Manchin and sometimes Kristen Sinema. Because, yeah, I don't know any others that are fucking talking about that. Anywho, let's see. Many of these Americans remain detached from core tenets of American society. The conviction that they hold agency in their lives, can improve their circumstances by working hard, and can provide a better life for their children than they themselves had. So, more work to be done. Yeah, I would say so. Bernie Sanders he wanted $30 trillion in new spending over a decade, guys. And had to pay for it in higher taxes. Well, thank God they rigged it against him, because my Lord have mercy. Because to be honest, and like in all fairness, social spending programs are actually quite popular. But the reason for that is I say this often, most Americans are retarded, okay? They don't actually have a full grasp on economics and on things like budgets and spending, and they can't look past their current situation to really understand what that sort of thing will do. And that's what I hope to kind of explore in this video, because we do have a way of looking back, from when the Great Society was actually enacted in the 60s, and what we have now as a result of it. It is stark. It is unsettling. It is completely dystopian and hellish. And if we do not learn from that now and really force people to look at this and to look at what has happened with all of this outrageous government spending, which does nothing. It does nothing. The government is so inept. They are so useless. They cannot do anything. They enact these programs and they have no oversight. They have nobody running the show properly. They have no way of doing any sort of like checks and balances to make sure the money's going to the right places. And so we're just dumping money into programs, and the corrupt people that co-opt these programs and co-opt this government money get rich, and the people get poorer. And then we have this endless vicious cycle of just spending and nothing getting accomplished. So one very big example of that is welfare. So this is the first video we're going to watch from Thomas Sowell, and he is speaking about welfare. If y'all aren't familiar with Thomas Sowell, I would recommend any one of his videos, every one of his videos. Go just have a Thomas Sowell marathon, if you will, because he is amazing. He's truly so smart and so right about everything that he says. He is an eye-opening figure. If you've never seen a video of his, if you've never heard him speak, do it now. I mean, after this video is over, but do it.
What the welfare system and other kinds of governmental programs are doing is paying people to fail. Insofar as they fail, they receive the money. Insofar as they succeed, even to a moderate extent, the money is taken away. This is even extended into the school systems, where they will give money to schools with low scores. Insofar as the school improves its education, the money is taken away, so that you are subsidizing people to fail in their own private lives and become more dependent upon the handouts.
We have expectations built in today about the quality of life, the quality of job, the level of income for which one expects in return. Why? Because we look at the level around us that it takes us to have a fairly decent level.
No, that's not why. I may have all sorts of expectations. The question is, what can I do? If someone else is subsidizing my expectations will be far higher. Insofar as the Center for Advanced Study was subsidizing my expectations a few years ago, I refused to work at UCLA for the normal full professor's salary. Why should I, when I can get the same money for being at the Center for Advanced Study with no hours, no duties, and no classes?
Cut off welfare tomorrow. What will they do? What will be their immediate response? At what price to their small children and to their middle-aged children? Yes, they'll get a job. In fact, the statistics show that women, in fact, are the most successful through the employment program. But what has to supplement that typically is the provision of some kind of daycare arrangement. Either the individual woman has to earn enough money to be able to pay privately for her daycare, or in fact she is, quote, subsidized through this insidious corrupting set of programs run by the federal government, which in fact makes her employable and a taxpayer. It's an interesting notion of trying to get people in a productive mode.
It's incredible the way you start the story in the middle, as if there's a predestined amount of poverty, a predestined amount of unemployment, and that the welfare system is not itself in any way responsible for that.
There is a predestined 20% of the bottom half of the population.
I have never, that's always been true.
There's going to be 20% at the bottom.
It's also true that 20% of the bottom population doesn't have to be living on the government and ruled by the government. You mentioned, for example, the female-headed household. Many of those, in addition to the grown woman who has all the kids, are teenage pregnancies. There's not a predestined amount of teenage pregnancy. I grew up in an era when people, and particularly blacks, were a lot poorer than today, faced a lot more discrimination than today, and in which the teenage pregnancy rate was a lot lower than today. I don't believe there is a predestined amount of teenage pregnancy, a predestined amount of husband desertion. Gutman has done a study of the black family, showing that this whole notion that the black family has always been disintegrating, that is nonsense, that his studies go up to 1925, the great bulk of black families were intact, two-parent families up through 1925, and going all the way back through the era of slavery. So it is now only within our own time that we suddenly see this inevitable tragedy which the welfare system says it's going to rush in to solve, but which it is itself a
We're talking about a very small group. We're talking about 12% of the families are not intact, are not two-parent families at any one period of time.
You mean among welfare recipients?
No, among the public at large. We're talking about 12% of the families. 12%.
That's right.
That's a small number. But
well, not of those on welfare.
We're still talking about a significant component of the bottom 20% that are the bottom 20%. Whether they are above the poverty line or below the poverty line, they are still the bottom 20%. And the issue is, what is the responsibility of the other 80%, if any, toward those individuals?
Does your program plan to eliminate there being a bottom 20%?
No, but it intends to raise the bottom 20%. So
you're raising them by having more illegitimacy, more unemployment.
I'm not making them have illegitimate children. I hope that's clear.
Oh, I think, you don't have to do that. You simply subsidize it.
Oh, he's spicy. So yeah, guys, I mean, So we clearly, this is such a good example. That's why I wanted to leave this video. What we have here is the liberal white woman, the detriment, guys, some would say, to our society as a whole. One of the worst, one of the worst types of people that we have here in our current culture, and versus the based black man, who is absolutely right on every point that he made. And he's basically saying that, it's the old adage, like if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. And this is so true. It's not just a trope. It's not just a saying that people say. It's that if you constantly give people incentives for handouts, guess what they're going to do? They're going to take the handout. Most people are simple-minded, guys. I don't want to have to say it again, but it's true. So most people cannot think outside of the abstract. And so you give them money, give them free money, they're going to take it, they're going to get complacent, and they're not going to want better because they're just fine by just giving whatever it is that they get. But if you incentivize personal growth and people to challenge themselves, people to, actually really make something of themselves, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, if you will. This is another saying that people say. Then guess what people are going to do? They're going to find a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. I have a lot of sayings tonight, guys. But I'm just saying, it's like you cannot expect for people to want to better themselves when you are treating them like babies and children and just constantly just trying to take care of them. That's what the government wants from all of us. They want us all to lay down so they can, baby powder our butts, slap a diaper on us, put us in front of a screen and into a pod and have us all eat bugs, okay? So that sounds like the type of society you want to live in. I don't know about you, but that's not what I want.
Your imagination and your initiative and your indignation will determine whether we build a society where progress is the servant of our needs. For in your time, we have the opportunity to move not only toward the rich society and the powerful society, but upward to the great society.
Remember that? Remember the programs that Lyndon Baines Johnson came up with back in 1965, the war on poverty, all of these things that the government was supposedly going to do to correct all those wrongs?
This administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America. Our chief weapons in a more pinpointed attack will be better schools and better health and better homes and better training and better job opportunities. Very often, a lack of jobs and money is not the cause of poverty, but the symptom. The cause may lie deeper in our failure to give our fellow citizens a fair chance to develop their own capacities, in a lack of education and training, in a lack of medical care and housing, in a lack of decent communities in which to live and bring up their children. It will not be a short or easy struggle. No single weapon or strategy will suffice. But we shall not rest until that war is won.
Funny enough, this is from inspiringquotes.us. I didn't write this, but this is a direct quote from Lbj'S. Just want to reiterate this point and really drive it home. Okay, he said, supposedly, now this is reported by two different people, I'll have those ends voting Democratic for the next 200 years, touting his underlying intentions for the Great Society programs. Lbj's confided with two like-minded governors on Air Force One. So he was bragging about how he would have black people voting Democrat for the next 200 years with these policies that he was going to enact with the Great Society by basically buying their votes. And for the last 70 years, it has worked, okay? There's been books written about him that have, alluded to the fact that he was not only a horrible racist and used all kinds of racist slurs and things of that nature, but that he was knowingly using this program as a guise to basically control the black population and to control everyone ultimately is what the goal was. And that, it wasn't on accident that this happened. So what do y'all think about that? I think that's interesting, but what do I know?
Number one problem domestically facing this country is a breakdown of the family. And President Obama said it. I didn't. A black kid, or kid, not just a black kid, a kid raised without a dad is 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crimes, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail.
The welfare system and other kinds of governmental programs are doing is paying people to fail. Insofar as they fail, they receive the money. Insofar as they succeed, even to a moderate extent, the money is taken away. This is even extended into the school system.
So, and I want to get into some of those programs, guys, before we continue on from here. I just want to share this list with you that I was able to compile through my research, and this is probably going to make you mad because it made me so mad. But these are all of the different things that either were implemented directly through bills or legislation passed during this time of LBJ having the presidency. And after like the his initial re-election, so he became president under JFK, through default, basically, in 1963. In 1964, he won re-election, and he was then president for 4 years. So in 66, they had, obviously, the midterm election, and this is when they won like a super majority in both Congress and the Senate, and all of this shit was just pushed through like no other. So these are all the different programs, okay? So we have food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, housing, welfare. They raised Social Security benefits. Education was completely upended and refunded. Basically, it was the first time that they actually increased the federal funding for education, and they started this policy of affirmative action. They redid and revamped the transportation sector. So let me get into the specifics here. So in 1965, President Johnson signed the Elementary Secondary Education Act into law. This law decidedly changed the role of the federal government in the world of K through 12 education. So it doubled the amount of federal expenditures for K through 12, and it worked to change the relationship between the states and the central government in the education arena. It called for the equal treatment of students no matter where they reside, and attempted to improve reading and math competency for children in poverty. And a lot of these things that I'm going to read off to you, they sound good, right? They sound good on paper, but you have to think not with your emotions, guys, because when you're running a business, you don't think with your emotions, right? You think logically, you think, mathematically, you think like on terms of like, we got to keep this business afloat. We can't just like give our product away to everyone who comes in here and tells us a sob story. Okay. It doesn't work like that. It's the same thing with the country. We used to have a proper country. We don't anymore because of shit like this. It's not in the Constitution for the federal government to get into all of these different arenas that they force themselves into. And I don't know how we've allowed it for this long, but it's insane. If you guys are, not aware of the Constitution, go back and reread it. I did this recently, like within the past few years. I went back and like thoroughly digested it and reread it and really understood and understand like what is in that document. And anything that's not listed in the document, the federal government really has no business sticking their damn noses in. So things like education, things like housing. Why are we passing bills, federal bills, and all of that shit? They have no right. They have no right. And all they're doing is stealing our money and putting it towards these programs who they get kickbacks because they make all of these different connections. And guess what? They're giving the funding to buddies of theirs. Okay, they all have these pet projects, and the friends that get the government funding for the programs, they'll do like a half-ass job of implementing something, and running it like barely, like just hardly running it, and then they'll take the rest of the money, pocket it. Some will go back to the politician, and bada bing, bada boom, rinse, repeat, okay? So, I continue. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 forbade job discrimination and the segregation of public accommodations. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 assured minority registration and voting. This is a good one, guys. The Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. Yeah, this is a gem right here. This is a beauty, as Donald Trump would say. The law abolished the national origins formula, which had been the basis of U.S. immigration policy since the 1920s. An opening entry to the U.S. to immigrants other than Northwestern Europeans, the act significantly altered immigration demographics in the country for the first time since it was founded. And now look at where we're at here. And so you might say to me, oh, Kelly, that's racist. Why would we only allow Northwestern Europeans into the country? Like, we need to allow everybody. Let's let all of Africa come over. Let's let all of Mexico come over. No. They had good reason, guys. And this is where it's going to get controversial, I guess. I don't know. You can hate me. You can debate me in the comments. I don't care. But, like, I truly believe this. And I think that, like, if you just hear me out and have an open mind, you might too. But there's a reason why they wanted to encourage mainly white European immigrants come to the country, resettle here, because there's such a thing as demographics. Every other country has it, guys. Every other country who's not Western woke idiots like the rest of us, okay? You go to Iran, guess what you're going to find over there? Mostly Iranians. You go to China, guess what you're going to find over there? Mostly Chinese. You go to Japan, you're going to find Japanese. You go to India, you're going to find mostly Indians. There's a reason for that, and it's demographics, okay? This is a white country with, a black minority for throughout all of history. That's what we have here in this country. We have a mostly white and minority black population, and that is the way that it should have stayed. Now, if we never had Planned Parenthood or some of the other things that we had, like this Great Society or the New Deal and all of these other things that were what you can call quote unquote structurally racist, then at some point, if the black population had overtaken the white population because birth rates or whatever else might have caused this, that's another thing. That wouldn't be a thing that anybody would be caring about, because those are natural citizens of America having babies. They're black Americans having babies. There's nothing wrong with that. Beautiful. We love it. We welcome it. We want it. And if that were to happen naturally, that's one thing. But this unnatural mass migration of immigrants from third world countries is unnatural, and it's an abomination, and it is evil to be doing to all Americans. And if you're not outraged by that, I don't know how to help you, because one day you're going to look around and you're going to not recognize this country anymore. And you're going to find people living on the streets who don't speak our language, who don't care about this country because they're not from here. They're flying a flag from their own home country, and they're treating you like shit and taking all of your programs and, basically not contributing to the taxes that pay for all of these programs, instead sending it back to their own home countries and their families. So, yeah. It's not racist. No, I reject that. So yeah, we, up until this act was passed, we're trying to keep our demographics the same. And there's also another reason for that as well. Americans have a different way of life. Like, we have a certain cultural standard. We have a certain, way of doing things here. We have higher standards than anywhere else in the world, okay? And in order to keep those standards and to keep this country running smoothly and greatly, you cannot just mass import all of these, people from these shithole countries, okay? I'm sorry. You just can't. It's not going to stay the same. It can't stay the same. So that one is a big F you to LBJ for that one. Thanks a lot, but no thanks. So he also, I'm already getting mad, he launched an unconditional war on poverty, okay, in the first months of his presidency with the goal of eliminating, listen to this is very, very lofty, eliminating hunger, illiteracy, and unemployment from American life. Okay, yeah, sure. Okay, it's just like the war on drugs, right? Let's get rid of the war on drugs. Let's just do away with hunger and unemployment. Yeah. Nobody unemployed in America ever again, guys. We won't rest until we get it. Yeah, okay. So you'll be awake forever. The centerpiece of the war on poverty was the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964. Okay, and it oversaw a variety of community-based anti-poverty programs. Again, word salad bullshit, a way to funnel and launder money. So all these programs didn't do anything. So 1967, the federal government began requiring state health departments to make contraceptives available to all adults who were poor. Meal programs for low-income senior citizens began in 1965, with the federal government providing funding for congregate meals and home-delivered meals. And the Child Nutrition Act, passed in 1966, made improvements to nutritional assistance to children, such as the introduction of the school breakfast program. Yeah, thanks a lot for all of that, too. You know, they've been fucking with our food for as long as it's been, as it's been going on. And I'll just leave that one there. The Department of Transportation, okay? Another useless bureaucracy that was established during this time. It began operations in 1967. They passed a variety of legislation to support improvements in transportation, including the Urban Mass Transportation Act, which provided $375 million for large-scale urban public or private rail projects in the form of matching funds to cities and states, and created the Urban Mass Transit Administration. High-Speed Ground Transportation Act of 1965, which resulted in the creation of high-speed rail between New York and Washington, and the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act of 1966, a bill largely taken credit for by Ralph Nader. Thanks a lot, Ralph, whose book Unsafe at Any Speed, he claims, helped inspire the legislation, which you can thank Ralph Nader and this legislation for now all of the traffic laws that they have in place, that they can basically stop you and impede on your civil liberties in order to issue you a ticket and a fine that you now have to pay to the government. Whereas before, you could carry on about your merry way and the police didn't have a right to stop you on the roadway. Obviously speeding and driving recklessly is one thing, but now they can stop you if you're not wearing a seatbelt. Something that you should have the right to do. I would argue for that. A lot of people called me dumb whenever I posted something like this on Instagram, or they were like saying like, "Oh my God, what a stupid take! Like, you want people to be unsafe. You want people to fly through their windshield whenever they're in a wreck and blah." Yes, if that's what they want to do. Are we not allowed to do other dangerous shit? Can people not bungee jump off the side of a freaking bridge? Like, are people not allowed to do dangerous stuff all the time? Why do we only regulate certain things, okay? It's ridiculous if you really stop and think about these sorts of things. All of these laws that they pass are only ways to impede upon your civil liberties, to get more money, squeeze as much money as they can out of you, and put it back into their own pocket so they can fund all of these bullshit programs that don't do anything, guys. It's such a sick cycle that we're in, and the fact that people don't think about it or see it, they just listen to whatever the government, whatever you say, government daddy, and salute. Yeah, I'll put on my seatbelt. I'll take my jab like a good little girl. No, not me. So, environmental legislation was enacted. Also, this included the Water Quality Act, the Clean Air Act, Wilderness Act, the Endangered Species Preservation Act, National Trails System Act, Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, Land and Water Conservation Fund Act, Solid Waste Disposal Act, Motor Vehicle Air Pollution Control Act, National Historic Preservation Act, and National Environmental Policy Act. And again, you guys know how I feel about these climate change activists, okay? That really gets my goose. So, by the end of the Johnson administration, 226 out of 252 major legislative requests had been met. Federal aid to the poor had risen from $9.9 billion in 1960 to $30 billion in 1968. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. Let's get on to the next thing here. Okay, Malcolm X. Let's see what he had to say about the white liberal and the conservatives. Let me start from here.
The Negro, namely the race problems, integration, civil rights issues, are all nothing but tools used by the whites who call themselves liberals against another group of whites who call themselves conservatives, either to get into power or to retain power. Among whites here in America, the political teams are no longer divided into Democrats and Republicans. The whites who are now struggling for control of the American political throne are divided into liberal and conservative camps. The white liberals from both parties cross party lines to work together toward the same goal, and white conservatives from both parties do likewise. The white liberal differs from the white conservative only in one way. The liberal is more deceitful, more hypocritical than the conservative. Both want power, but the white liberal is the one who has perfected the art of posing as the Negro's friend and benefactor. And by winning the friendship and support of the Negro, the white liberal is able to use the Negro as a pawn or a weapon in this political football game that is constantly raging between the white liberals and the white conservatives. The American Negro is nothing but a political football, and the white liberals control this ball through tricks or tokenism, false promises of integration and civil rights. In this game of deceiving and using the American Negro, the white liberals have complete cooperation of the Negro civil rights leaders, who sell our people out for a few crumbs of token recognition, token gains, token progress.
And yeah, people used to talk like this back in the day. I'm about to play another video for you guys of LBJ saying a few choice words, but I just wanted to kind of like reiterate what he was just saying there. And I think that like this is the message, and this is the point of this whole video and this message in general, is that we want all people to be able to make a name for themselves, make wealth for themselves, do whatever it is that they want to do in this country, despite whatever it is your race, your background is. Because at the end of the day, we have to live in the present moment, okay? If we focus on what happened in the past, we're all screwed. We're all screwed because nothing is ever going to correct it. We cannot fix the world. And just like JFK said in the beginning of this video, we cannot impose our will onto other people. We cannot fix all of the wrongs that were done in the past. And one quote that I really liked while doing my research, I came across, and it goes as following: I reject reparations and income redistribution because it is unjust. Do I owe a debt to someone I have never wronged because of the melanin content of my skin? And I think that's really the crux of it all, is that why can't we, as white people, want just, like, to leave all of that shit behind? Like, there's still people in this country that are racist. There are still people on both sides that are racist. Blacks and whites, Asians, Mexicans. Everybody has biases. Everyone has these different disparities amongst groups. But at the end of the day, if we can collectively just say that, like, for the most part, as Americans, we want the best for those who are good and for those that are here and for those that are morally right, morally correct. Why is that so bad? Why is it so bad to just want better for not only just blacks, but for everybody, And that's my whole thing, is that, like, I want to be able to fix this somehow. I want to be able to fix the relations that have been so damaged, that I've seen in my own personal life, through my own personal relationships with people in my life, deteriorate as of recent years because of, like, I don't even know why. It's propaganda. It's all of this, like, hateful rhetoric that we see every day that make people think that they're victims when they're not. Yes, your mom might have been a victim. Your grandma might have been a victim. That's horrible. But guess what? Life's tough. We all have our different issues and struggles. And if you focus on that and try to blame someone for it that holds no blame, I don't see how that's productive. I don't see how that is going to further any sort of like good in the world. It's just utterly destructive and fruitless. So now, you guys, I want to go to another throwback video of LBJ. If you guys didn't believe me about his racist tendencies, okay? Again, trigger warning. Strong language from a white man coming here.
Say, well, you can't have a poll tax. They can say you can't have a gas tax or a cigarette tax or anything else. Federal government's telling the states pretty tough what their business is. Now, you can say that they can't discriminate, but I've got to prove that it discriminates, and I can't prove it in Texas. There are more niggers voting there now than white folks. There are more of them buying poll taxes now than white folks. Higher percentage of them. And I can't show that the literacy test that discriminate against, because they haven't got any. They got no test at all. Just by God, anybody that can get up and pay $1.06 can vote.
Oh my God. Yikes. So, yeah, he said stuff there. He definitely said a mouthful there. And he said some other stuff, too. He really did. So, this article is from GoErie.com. news.com. So it says, systemic racism isn't real. Okay, so I read with dismay the statement signed by 3 of the bishops of Erie. I reject racism in all forms, but racism must be defined by its traditional meaning. The judging of one as superior or inferior, guilty or innocent, depending upon the color of one's skin or heredity. I utterly reject the poisonous creed of systemic racism and implicit bias. I agree that as long as schools are funded by taxes based on the wealth of residents, such as property taxes, that Erie City schools will always be more poorly funded than those in Fairview. Meaning that if you live in a poorer area, you're going to have shitty public schools. And if you live in a rich area, you're going to have better public schools. This is also a major reason why the federal government should not have control over these funds. They should be distributed at a state level, and really everything needs to go back to a state level. That's how our government was supposed to be set up in the first place. And all of this federal overreach has gotten us to the place that we're at now, where all of these different things, all those different acts, like look at transportation, look at housing, look at Medicare, Medicaid, look at food stamps. All these programs are enlarged. They're all shit. They're not working properly. All of these different departments are just a joke. Transportation. Pete Buttigieg is the Secretary of Transportation. He just knows ass from a fucking hole in the ground, okay? I don't know what to tell you. Nothing's working properly because the federal government has its big ass nose into every corner of this country and every pocket in which they can sniff out a dollar bill. And they need to get the hell out. So, yeah. I believe that justice should be blind to everything but the facts. I do not accept statistical justice or disparate income. Unjust laws must be changed, but crime must be punished. It is tragic that black people are in prison far beyond what statistics would predict. Look at generations of look at generations of family breakdown and welfare dependency through government help, rather than declaring that prison populations must reflect the proportion of minorities in the population. Facts on this, okay? So all these people that say that blacks are in prisons at a bigger percentage than white people, look at the crime statistics. I will point you in that direction, and just, if you don't see the connection there, then you are one of the low IQ people in this country. Because blacks are committing the majority of the violent crimes. Okay, and that is just the truth. And there's certain race grifters that'll come out and say oh, well, look at these numbers. Based on numbers, actually white people commit more crimes. But you're being an idiot and you're doing a strawman argument, because if you look at the numbers, understanding that black people are 13% of the population and white people are 60% of the population, and actually what they're doing now is they're starting to count Hispanics as white, okay, to try to alter crime statistics and try to alter immigration statistics. This is a thing. This is a real thing that they're doing. And I don't even want to get into that topic because that'll just anger me to no limits. But look at the correlation, those numbers that people put up, and apply it to the population, okay? And it's off the charts, okay? Justice, like Christianity, should be mere justice or Christianity, or the meaning of the word is corrupt and illegitimate. I love Thomas Sowell. He's so good. So let's get into this other article now. And this is from 1995. I just wanted to point this out to you guys because I found this fascinating. This is from the New York Times, which we all know is the worst, okay? Especially in current day. One of the worst liberal publications. And even they were saying in 1997, racism is not the issue. Opinion piece, okay? Why are we having a national argument on race? By all objective measures, recent opinion polls, demographic data, and academic studies, race relations between blacks and whites have never been better. What is more, the majority of African Americans are content, even optimistic, about their interactions with European Americans, according to a close reading of a recent Gallup poll, for example, and other surveys. The viewpoint has also been forcefully argued by the scholars Stephen and Abigail Thurnstorm in their new book, America in Black and White. While I differ with many of their arguments, particularly with the opposition to affirmative action, their basic premise is correct, that relations between the races are getting better, as are the conditions of most African Americans. Okay, and this was in 1997. So this is a pretty fascinating article. I will link this in the description because I don't want to, I know it's dragging on and I don't want to go too, long for you guys. Hopefully y'all are still watching, but let's move on to this other article. I just wanted to kind of touch on some of these, and I wanted to show you guys a few more videos, so I don't want to drag this on. This is from the Daily Wire. 7 statistics that show that systemic racism doesn't exist in policing. Number 1, police are more likely to shoot whites than blacks. Police are also less likely to shoot at unarmed black suspects than unarmed white suspects. According to American Free Press, Peter for every black killed by a white police officer in the U.S. every year, there are about 71 blacks killed by other blacks. Wow. Oh, that's another. So anyways, blacks do get pulled over for traffic stops more often than whites, but that's because blacks commit a disproportionate amount of traffic offenses. Interesting. Racial activists accuse stop and frisk of being racist, and yet the percentage of blacks stopped is actually underrepresented when compared to the percentage of blacks that commit crimes. 6, blacks are not over-arrested and are actually underrepresented in prison. Yikes. By a margin of 50% to 46%, black voters support New York City's broken windows policing, according to a Quinnipiac poll. So I will link this article, guys, if you want to read about these facts. The Daily Wire posted. Very good article. This was back from 2016, so again, another older article. If we lose the structure of a family, if we lose the nuclear family, we lose everything. And that's just the fact of the matter. Okay, so let's move on to some of these other ones here. I'm going to try to move through these kind of quickly. Thomas Sowell, again, with more wise words of wisdom.
Just a scene is occurring to me that we all watched. Well, actually, probably you didn't watch it because you always have better things to do. You're always either reading a book or writing one. But those of us who watched President Trump's State of the Union address will remember the moment when he announced in the chamber that the black unemployment rate had now fallen to the lowest point since records for black unemployment had begun to be kept. That is how the economy quickly the economy had begun to grow again in the recent couple of quarters. Black unemployment lowest since the records began to be kept. And the Democratic side of the chamber sat on its hands. The Republicans applauded, but the Democrats sat on their hands, and there were some close-ups on camera, and not only did they sit on their hands, they all looked as though they just sucked on a lemon. What on earth is going on? What's going on there?
Oh, it will take a wiser man than me to explain all of that. But I will say that people have a vested interest in black victimhood. I mean, without black victimhood, you cannot get the black turnout, and the Democrats would lose a lot of elections. So they must constantly push this. One of the most painful and I think cynical examples was this order issued during the Obama administration that the schools must reduce the disparity in discipline of black males, and that government money would be withheld if they didn't.
Right.
And one of the things that has happened is that you've seen an enormous escalation of violence. This recent terrible shooting in Florida with one of the kids who he wasn't black, but he was Hispanic, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to keep their numbers right, to please the federal government, all kinds of things are ignored, and all kinds of activities. For example, beating up teaching in the classroom. People would not expel for that as they once would have been. And the net result is that you put in the hands of a small group of thugs the ability to prevent an entire class from getting a decent education. And that, too, happens on the other side of the Atlantic among the white underclass with very much the same reasoning. People are afraid to study because they'll get beaten up by the ones who don't want education. And the net result is, for the rest of their lives, they are handicapped. And this is done over here in the idea that you're doing a favor to blacks.
a fallacy is that the current fatherless families so prevalent among contemporary blacks are a legacy of slavery, where families were not recognized under slavery. This ignores the fact that the problem has become much worse among generations of blacks far removed from slavery than among generations closer to the era of slavery. Close quote. Explain that.
You mean explain why it is so? Or
Yes, why is that? What on earth is going on there? That is so counter to what we assume.
Well, first of all, most people have not recognized the fact that, that if you go back into the 20s, you find that married couple families were much more prevalent among blacks then than today. You find also, incidentally, that the blacks were, as late as 1930, blacks had a lower unemployment rate than whites. So all these things that we complain about and attribute to the era of slavery, those things should have been worse in the past than in the present.
Right.
But in fact, they're worse in the present than in the past. And I think if you want to look for a turning point, it would be since the 1960s.
And what happened in the 1960s?
Oh, you began to have not only the welfare state, you began to have the mindset that goes with the welfare state, so that there was no stigma any longer attached, for example, to being on relief or welfare.
And so, but why? Well, illegitimacy is exploding now among, it's high among Hispanics,
Yes.
and it's exploding among whites. But the Moynihan report, when was that, Tom?
Oh, in the 60s, 65.
When Moynihan talked about the illegitimacy rate among blacks, which was exploding then. So what if the welfare state changes the way Americans think?
Yes.
Why did black Americans prove susceptible to that change first?
Because they were poor. I don't think that many Asian American girls who are preparing to go off to Stanford or Harvard are going to say, hey, I can live on welfare, why should I abstain?
Big facts. So yeah, Tom, I mean, he said it so much more eloquently than I ever could, but that is to the T, the point that I was trying to make. Thomas Sowell, once again, says it so very well. But let's move on, and then I want to share with you guys the Planned Parenthood portion of this. Exposing Margaret Sanger and the racist roots of Planned Parenthood. This was another huge issue, and this contributed greatly to this, time period, the 60s. And what was going on with the Great Society was working in tandem with the evolution of Planned Parenthood, and this was kind of like a psyop into those communities where it was done under the guise of allowing women to have control over their bodies, even though, one could argue it's not their bodies, and providing contraceptives and things like that. But Margaret Sanger, she too had an agenda. She too had an underlying problem with black people in society that she wanted to eliminate. And there were nefarious intentions at play here, and let's get into some of those.
Planned Parenthood hails founder Margaret Sanger as a champion of civil rights, but one thing they don't talk about is the racism behind her fight to legalize abortion. A group of African American leaders want to focus attention on her ideology and how it affected black birth rates. Abigail Robertson has more on this story.
Margaret Sanger strived for a society that limited births to only those she deemed fit to have children.
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin.
Many pro-choice advocates see her as a hero, but critics call her a racist eugenics promoter who targeted black communities with her Planned Parenthood clinics.
Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, once said, colored people are like weeds, they need to be exterminated.
People don't understand that 79% of Planned Parenthood clinics are located in minority communities, and that minority communities shoulder a disproportionate amount of abortion.
Dr. King says while African Americans make up only 13% of the U.S. population, over 30% of aborted babies are from black mothers.
Under the veil of secrecy and deception, 60+ million babies have not been born because they were aborted legally since '73. 1/3 of that population belong to the African American community.
Planned Parenthood recently celebrated its 100th anniversary, prompting pro-life leaders to unite under the banner 100 No More to educate the public on the harmful impact Planned Parenthood has had on the African American community. 100 No More hope rallies like this one in Washington spread across the country to enlighten people about Sanger and her tragic legacy.
I have a real serious concern about the number of abortions that's taking place in the minority community, particularly the black community, and that I see this as a form of genocide. that is something we need to take a serious look at.
Absolutely.
Planned Parenthood receives around $500 million each year from taxpayers.
96% of the time, if a pregnant woman walks into their clinic, that she will have an abortion.
Pro-life advocates want Congress to move that money to women's clinics that do not perform abortions.
They outnumber already around the country Planned Parenthood clinics 20-1. They truly help poor women. They truly care for the least of these, but they don't do abortions.
Reporting from Washington, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate, abortion is not health care. Abortion is not women's rights. Abortion
The right
is
to abortion is not a real right.
No, ma'am! Okay, yeah, I agree. The right to abortion is not a real right. Right, I get it. Yes, I agree. But I'm just saying, all these people that are stuck on this point, okay, it's not your right to kill your fetus, and the government should not be paying for it ever. If you want to do that, you know, there should be an avenue for you to be able to do that, but it's not through government funding. It should never be allowed. So, and the whole purpose of Planned Parenthood from the beginning was eugenics. Margaret Sanger was a racist woman who wanted to put as many Planned Parenthoods as she could in poor areas, you know, and maybe it wasn't completely about race. It was more about class structure, but I think that she had a special sort of hatred for minority populations, and especially black people, and wanted to make sure that this agenda was being pushed within those communities so that they could eliminate as many of those babies as possible. And it's worked for the most part. If you look at the population growth of blacks in America, it has really, the needle has not moved at all. And it's because of, you know, it's not because black people aren't having babies. They are. But as many babies as they're having, they're aborting just as many, if not more. Okay? So the population, the percentage of black people in this country should have and would have grown had it not been for Planned Parenthood. Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood are single-handedly to blame for the stagnation in the growth rate of black people in America. So this is a direct quote, Human Life International. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, from Margaret Sanger. So what do you guys think about everything that we talked about in this video? Sorry it was so long. You know, my apologies. This was a big topic, and I did a ton of research on this, so I'll try to condense it as much as I can. But let me know your thoughts, guys. If you're still here watching this video, I thank you so much. And if you haven't subscribed and you're still watching this, what are you doing? Please go subscribe. Follow me on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on everywhere. Like the video if you liked it. Comment on the video, dude. Do the thing, guys. Please help me out. It really does help me. And yeah, until next time, you know, I will see you guys later. Okay? Bye.
I just tell the truth, and telling the truth is crazy in a world full of lies. If you mix brilliance with bravery, that we can ignite something. Even this conversation alone can ignite the people.
The time is now to express and for people to believe in themselves. The time is now for it to be okay to be great. People in this world shun people for being great, for being a bright color, for standing out. But the time is now to be okay to be the greatest you.